speaking of conversations and things that we get hit up about on social media or text or whatever, figured we would go ahead and dive into a podcast that we actually recorded for you guys. Well, we thought we did, and it did not go that well, but we are just going to do it better than we did it the first time. So I figured we start with pretty much just like the actual topic being what people are asking us they should implement in their lives, right? Like all these habits are out there, whether it's something as, not extreme in quotation marks, as like Ozempic, or something as regular as, a cold plunge or juice diets or CBD or whatever, right? I get these questions all the time. I know you do as well.
Yep.
So I figured we can kind of spend the first couple of minutes just talking about general practices, thought processes around implementing things in your life, when to, when not to, and then we can kind of go rapid fire, buy or sell on some of these things and let you know our thoughts. And then we'd love to hear yours once we give this to you. So, I'll start. I think that we spoke about it. For me, my ready response, I wish I could copy paste it. I probably should copy paste it because I get enough Instagram DMs about stuff like this. You should only implement something if it specifically and uniquely benefits you. No matter what the data says, no matter what science says or who's doing it, if 5 billion people are doing something and it all works really well for them, and you try it and it makes your life worse, that is a good use case for you to be like, you know what, guys, keep going. Good luck. This didn't work out well for me. I'm going to try something different or go back to what I was doing. If getting up an extra hour in the morning to cold plunge is ruining your morning routine and you can't get into work and you're all fucked up and you can't stop shivering, cold plunging isn't for you, bro. It's just not for you. Like, let's just not do it, And I think that if more people went at life less spoon feed me what I need to do and more give it a try, implement it intelligently, let us know what or give yourself the biofeedback. And if it's good biofeedback, keep doing it. And if it's poor, then don't. Do something different,
I think also a big aspect of this is like, what are you trying to accomplish with this modality that you're implementing, right? So like for cold plunges, are you trying to reduce your stress and anxiety? Like, are you trying to improve your mental health? Are you trying to improve your recovery and reduce like your systemic inflammation? With something like Ozempic, are you trying to lose body weight as a percent of your total body weight? Or are you trying to improve your body composition,
right,
as a percentage of lean mass and compare that to percentage of body fat, right? Those are two very different things. People don't think all the way through that shit, but it's extremely important. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Because you need to clearly iron that out before you start doing it, because then you're not going to have any fucking understanding of what your goals are, like what the best outcome actually is, but also how to utilize it, right? Because for cold plunges, for example, using that for mental health improvement versus improving your recovery are going to be different. Like, those are different best practices for each of those two independent goals. So if you're trying to improve your recovery for a cold plunge, right? And if you're trying to balance that with muscle growth and strength gain and you're training in the gym, you don't want to do it immediately post-workout. Seems pretty fucking obvious. Like cold therapy has pretty resoundingly been shown to impair hypertrophy when utilized after training within a certain window, right? So you don't want to do that. It just makes no sense. If you consolidate that to first thing in the morning, like you said, and you keep it away from training, maybe then that will have some recovery improvement benefits there. But so it's the same thing with pretty much any modality, right? Like, do you want to take a CBD gummy right before you're about to get on an important work meeting? Probably not. Right before bed? Maybe. Sure. If you're trying to use that to improve your sleep, improve your stress management. So again, it's like understanding what the goal for these things actually is at the beginning, and then figuring out, researching, okay, best practices for accomplishing this goal. Very important for all of this stuff. So I can actually put it to you. So we want to start with cold plunges. I feel like that's a easy high level one. We can just go into detail there.
Sure. Yeah. No, let's go ahead and start with cold plunges. Are you asking me if I'm buying or selling them?
So Cold plunges for, let's say for recovery from training, buy or sell?
So it's funny as you were speaking. So and so I think there are. I'm split here. I'm going to mostly sell it.
Okay.
But there are cases where I would buy it. So, and I'm very, very close here.
I actually think I feel the same way.
And so I would mostly sell it because I believe there are other ways to really optimize your recovery that don't involve jumping into a cold tank.
Yeah.
However, if you're needing to recover quickly from certain types of training to train again, i.e. football 2-a-days, right? I just trained in the morning. I need to have fresh legs. I need to be able to run again this evening. I'm going to go hop in. I'm not trying to grow. I just need to be fresh again.
That's very important. Like if your goal is purely to reduce inflammation, then cold therapy is extremely helpful because it vasoconstricts your blood vessels and it really dampens the ability for your muscle cells to release like interleukins and prostaglandins and all the shit that's going to pull in those inflammatory markers and pull in like all that, the water, all of the lymph fluid and shit like that will cause the inflammation, right? So if you can essentially shut those signals down, or if you can dampen them by using something like a cold therapy, then yeah, like what you said, if you're doing 2-a-days, or if you are doing back-to-backs, right? So like if you have a basketball game on Friday and then another game on Saturday, yeah, like it might make sense to do some kind of cold therapy that night after your first game. But if your goals are purely like hypertrophy based, right, then cold therapy, in my mind, is probably not what you're looking for. If anything, I would say that heat therapy is closer to what you're looking for whenever it comes to muscle growth and hypertrophy.
Yeah.
And then in total, I would say contrast therapy is probably better than either one of those independently for actually recovery and probably also hypertrophy, as long as it's not too close to your training for muscle growth.
Yes, and that's what I was going to end with, was contrast therapy being actually my favorite. And most people don't have access to a jacuzzi or a hot tub and a cold tub, but that would be, as a coach, as an athlete, that would be my go-to. I think I have the best balance in being able to bounce back, but also retain and progress performance-based, right? And continuing to align with my goals. But yeah, so I'm selling, because I do believe there are other ways to just optimize your recovery without potentially compromising your goals, aside from those use cases where we present like quick turnarounds and quick training and back-to-backs.
And another thing that we should mention here, especially as it relates to cold plunges, is what is the effect size? Like, how much of an impact are you expecting this modality to actually make towards whatever your goal is? So if we're talking about cold plunge, how much is it going to improve your recovery? If it is worth it, so if it's going to give you maybe like a 50% boost towards your recovery, then cool, we can talk about that. If it's like a 2% boost, it's probably not even worth your time. It's not worth running the water. Like, it's not worth the discomfort, right? If you're doing it just to take a video and post it on social media, maybe, but is that your goal? Or is your goal to actually improve your performance, improve your recovery? So those are important things too. But like other aspects of cold plunges that I had written down, like metabolic effects. So like, have you ever looked into like how brown fat is stimulated from cold exposure?
Shivering.
Yeah, like shivering, like hypothermic effects. So like that's something I've looked into before. I'm not an expert on it, but it is interesting nonetheless. But again, like effect size, right? Like, is it worth you thinking about and exerting a lot of time and energy towards exclusively burning brown fat through shivering,
right,
versus just decreasing your caloric intake a little bit more or doing a little bit more exercise, right? I'm not the expert. I'm not the one, well, maybe I am an expert, but I'm not the one to actually talk about brown fat exclusively. But that's the question that we want to ask ourselves, right? Like, what is the effect size? So moving from that into semaglutide Ozempic, I think that's actually a good pivot point, because effect size, whenever it comes to Ozempic, and I'm just going to say body weight reduction, using that as a standard rather than exclusively like improved body composition.
Yeah, I'm a hard buy, and I understand why people, again, the people who are pointing at the problems in the picture there, are pointing at them, especially as it continues to become more cosmetic or commoditized. Like, people can just quickly go out and go, oh, I just want to lose a couple pounds or whatever, right? And just go get a shot. And it's like, that's not what it's designed for. I think about my family. I think about my very, very overweight, obese family, right? We'll get into genes later, but my family has genes they grow, right? They grow, and we have to buy bigger genes. And if you're not very, very careful about your activity, you are going to grow in some direction. You want to make sure that you grow in the right direction. Either you're putting on lean body mass or you're putting on fat, right? So for people in my family who I'm like, their lives have been drastically affected, cut short, the comorbidities that come along with being obese and overweight are there's a litany of them, we know. So if you're telling me that this right here could extend their life, not only in years, but also their quality of life, right? I think about the natural degradation of a person as they get older, their joints and whatnot. Well, it's exponentially worse if you're fat, right? Like, it's way, way worse. And if you're telling me that my, 70, 80-year-old mom might not be reduced to a cane walker or a wheelchair, but she'll be able to be able-bodied because she will be a relatively more healthy body weight, then I'm yes, let's do this, right? Like, if you're saying no because some girl in LA is trying to lose 10 pounds on the thing, go talk to her. It's not a system problem. That's a her problem. That's a them problem. It's not something for you to go out and try to tear down what, to use your words, could possibly be a miracle drug.
Yeah. And how much have I swayed you on this with how pro Ozempic I am, or pro semaglutide?
Honestly, whenever you're really pro something, I try to be against it. So you haven't really swayed me at all. If anything, you have a lot of knowledge on it, right? And so we've talked at length about it, which has then encouraged me to go get more knowledge on it.
Yeah.
For me, it's actually less about you and more about my just personal experience. And like, dude, I've gone toe to toe, and you don't know what it's like unless you've been in a situation before where you're staring at a person that you love to death, that you want to help so badly, and you've seen them try and fail and try and fail. And sure, there are definitely things that person has to own that they did not do to 100% or did not do. And also the empathy of like, you're in such a demoralized place, right? Right now, my uncle, 6'5", 370, 360 on a good day. Like, he's not in good shape, right? It's not a good time for him. And I've seen him regularly in the gym at times. I've seen him try to watch what he eats. And of course, when he doesn't make the headway he wants to make after 6 months, like, that's hard. That's hard for him to swallow. Like, there's a defeatist mindset that sets in. And as much as you want to be like, no, bro, don't give up, like, you can do this, you also have to be like, yeah, but you have a lot of things working against you. It's not just your habits. There are a lot of things working around you or working against you. And I can see that because your sisters are fat, your mom was fat, your kids, like, I can see it all around you. So it's definitely not just a you problem, bro. So if there's something out there that can help him, right, that can give him some hope, I'm buying it.
I'm a hard buy. Clearly, I'm a hard buy. I am generally going to be much more interested in things that have physiological fingerprints, I guess, for lack of a better word, that can very easily be traced back to, hey, here is how this effect is going to be caused, right? So the effect of body weight reduction, the effect of managed diabetes, the effect of reduced incidence of addiction, whatever, right? Whatever we're talking about whenever it comes to semaglutide. If you can take something like GLP-1, right? Which is the molecule that semaglutide is an agonist of. So it's essentially a like molecule, right? That's how it's having its effects. You can take GLP-1 and you can say, hey, this is the molecule that we're replicating here, and this is how it has its effects or how it exerts its effects in the body. And these are the physiological cascades that are happening from it exerting its effects. That to me is like, okay, cool. I can clearly see how 1 + 1 = 2 here. So let's focus a little bit more on this, right? But whenever we're talking about something like cold plunges, right? So just to go back one step, there's a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect because what you're expecting is environmental. We'll talk about this in a second. Again, you're expecting an environmental stimulus to then cascade down into a physiological response, which then has far-reaching effects, right? And you're basically hoping for that. And yeah, sometimes things can be unexpected. Like we've seen cold therapy, cold plunges be unexpected for certain benefits that it has, but there's always like kind of a break in the chain somewhere. We can't quite fill in the gaps for how all of these things are happening. We just know that they're happening, right? But it does kind of take a leap of faith to get there. Whenever it comes to a lot of like pharmaceutical drugs, granted, not all pharmaceutical drugs are great, right? Like we've talked about trade-offs before, and pharmaceutical drugs in general are the ultimate understanding of trade-offs. The idea here is that you have some disorder, some disease, some impediment that is requiring a pharmaceutical intervention to be able to manage or to rectify. And the disorder, the disease that you have is severe enough that you are willing to accept the potential trade-offs of side effects from taking that pharmaceutical drug. Granted, some of the side effects can potentially be, with some drugs, some of them can potentially be worse than the original disorder. And that's never good, right? It's never a good thing. So people that have tried to, treat their anxiety with a drug, and then they end up, developing suicidal tendencies or suicidal thoughts, or, they get sexual dysfunction from taking like an antidepressant whenever they were just a little bit sad one day, right? And they got prescribed an antidepressant. Like these things are obviously like very bad. But whenever it comes to Ozempic, semaglutide, we're talking about people like what you said, people that have comorbidities that are far-reaching, people that in many instances, if they do not correct the course that they're on, then they are leading pretty in one direction towards early death.
Yeah.
Or towards a very reduced comfortable lifespan or health span, however you want to look at that, right? Yeah, they might live until they're 70, but if their quality of life is so low because they're dealing with all of these different disorders and diseases because of their body weight, that's not what we want. Because like for a lot of reasons, right? But like we can look at the healthcare system. Like, why do we think that American healthcare costs so much? Because we have so many people that are living with a lot of diseases and disorders that are having to pay a lot of money every single month to manage those things. Something like Ozempic or semaglutide. I'm just going to continue saying Ozempic and use that as a reference for semaglutide, but like I want everyone to understand, like semaglutide is like the generic name for the GLP-1 agonist that kind of can be lumped. So Ozempic is semaglutide anyway, and then vice versa. So yeah, like what we want to focus on is like, what are like the effect sizes of something like people taking Ozempic? Well, like 20% body weight reduction, that is gigantic. That is fucking gigantic, right? And like these are potentially the differences between someone dying at 60 versus someone living a comfortable life until 80. And yes, right now there are limitations, right? Like you have to stay on it, and it's an expensive drug right now. And, there are stomach upset issues happening, and like there are some other stuff, like you do lose a good amount more of muscle mass, so in proportion to the body weight that you're losing, it's not really a lot. It can be expected, but again, like if you do not exercise, you're going to lose muscle mass, right? Like your body will metabolize muscle to prevent it from metabolizing a lot of the other body mass that you're already carrying. I've also seen some stuff that shows that higher Ozempic use without exercise will also lower bone density, which again, to be fucking expected, right? It makes sense if you're not doing.
It's got to come from somewhere.
Got to come from somewhere. Yeah, it's got to come from somewhere. So again, these things make sense. But again, like I'm a hard buy on Ozempic in general. I'm not saying that it is not without trade-offs. I'm not saying that it doesn't have side effects. I'm not saying that some of the side effects eventually could be proven to be severe. As of right now, I haven't seen anything that has led me to conclusively believe that there are severe side effects that we should be worried about, to the degree that it should make us less excited about this drug's potential to help people who have been to this point unhelpable. And going back to the U.S. healthcare expenditures point, how much money do you think the U.S. will save every year if people who are obese were to go on Ozempic and lose 15 to 20% of their body weight? We're billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that the U.S. taxpayers would save in healthcare expenditures if everyone were to lose that much body weight, right? Again, this is not a cosmetic drug. People are using it for cosmetic purposes, and they're getting tummy aches, and they're getting upset, and they're saying that this is a demon drug. But again, I'm not talking about those people. I don't care about those people, right? If you're 20% body fat and you go on Ozempic, I don't give a shit about you. I'm sorry, I don't give a shit about you, right? But if we're talking about people who are 50% BMI or 50 BMI and 40% body fat and having comorbidities out the ass, metabolic disease, like, type 2 diabetes, like all kinds of shit, it's either this or it's gastric bypass surgery. Like
significantly more expensive.
Not only that, more invasive, more dangerous. But the thing is, people who are anti-Ozempic would be totally okay with being like, yeah, just get surgery. Stop promoting big pharma. Stop funding like these companies. That is the shit that really pisses me off, though. It's because people have just such a wild misconception of what these things are meant to be. And obviously, we're healthcare professionals, so we have a vested interest in people continuing to pay us to help them. So in a lot of ways, something like semaglutide would be contra our interests, right? Because if someone can just take a drug and lose, 20, 30 pounds, well, what need do they have for us? Right. That's not how it is. That's not how it is, right? This is not a single shot thing. Best outcomes are always when combined with better diet, better choices, better habits, and exercise. Always. And if you want to not have to take this drug forever, which I don't think anybody wants to take drugs forever, right? You have to change your habits. But that's another thing. Semaglutide is great with rewiring your dopamine reward system in your brain. So it has effects on the things that you find enjoyment in or the things that you find interest in, right? So all of a sudden you find less interest in that bag of Doritos and more interest in walks in nature. Guess what? That's a fucking great thing. That's a great thing, and we should be happy about that. Studies have come out saying that semaglutide or Ozempic has potential positive benefits for things like Parkinson's, things like Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular benefits. It's potentially a wonder drug, right? Which is why Novo Nordisk, which is the company that makes Ozempic, has a larger market cap than certain countries in the EU. It's insane, right? I think it is already $1 trillion company based essentially off of the back of one drug. So yeah, people can be upset about there potentially being this magic bullet solution to a problem that other people have dedicated their life to coming up with convoluted solutions to. But, again, we help people with their nutrition. If this is a tool in our arsenal now that we can utilize, we should be happy about that because it allows us to do our job more effectively. Because then we can get people past that initial hump, and then we can start working on their habits. We can work on their improved nutrition, work on their improved exercise. And then the hard work of getting them started, it's already done for us, right?
Yep.
So again, people just, they focus on the wrong things. And I think that if we're looking at something like Ozempic as a way to get people on the right path, so that's the way that it should be, right? It's like obesity in general, and we can actually talk about this whenever we talk, or if we even get there, talking about like nature versus nurture and shit. But I think I mentioned this in the video that I made yesterday. Maybe I didn't, but our genetics, essentially, they're a really deep rut. So if we're imagining ourselves as a ball rolling down a hill, our genetics are a really deep rut. It's really hard to pop out of that rut. But if a big gust of wind comes and pushes us out of the rut, we can break free of it, right? And then we can start etching another rut somewhere else. That's the equivalent of something like Ozempic, right? Where it's like, it can just nudge you off of the path that you're on and push you towards a different path. That's what we want, right? We don't want it to do all the work for us. We just want it to get us over the hump, get us over the lip of that rut so that we can do the rest of it ourselves.
Yeah, it's the latter point, the framing and the execution, right? Making sure that people understand that this is not a lifetime solution. This is to overcome that inertia, give you some momentum, and then with some, proper education and habit changes, right? Like, and I think a point that you made that I kind of want to piggyback on, it's not just the internal, hey, it's, kind of dampening the dopamine reaction you have to certain things. It's also an external, like, rewiring that's happening. As you lose weight and you are hopefully incorporating healthier habits, you start to tie those habits to, like, I'm feeling better, I'm doing better, I look better, I feel better about what I see in the mirror, how I present to people. And then something that we need to get into, but like something I feel very strongly about, when you change the way a person feels about themselves and the way that they decide to present themselves to the world, they go from being the girl with their hair in their face, like trying to like just shuck through life, and instead they open and they see people with a smile and they're confident. Everything exponentially starts to get better, right? Like, people start to interact a little differently. Self-esteem goes, like, the cascading positive effects or possible positive effects of something like this, they're innumerable. Like, there's so many. And so it's one of those things where when you hear someone who just wants to poke at the issue or an issue that they see, it's like, you just want to shout, bro. Like, you just want to yell, and that's not constructive. And so quickly, I'm just going to tune you out.
Yeah. What is the presumed and hoped for effect size, right? That's the best way of thinking of a lot of this stuff. If it is a large potential effect, focus more on it. If it's small, negligible, 1%, unless you are already tapped into like the optimized shit you should be doing and you have everything like straight, you have all your ducks in a row, don't worry about the shit that's like 1%, right? And I think maybe this is a good speed run opportunity. So how do you feel about like CBD?
I think we talked about for anxiety and stuff like that, or just in general?
Anxiety. We'll say anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that there are enough when used, right? And like their timing of the day, right? So like, I don't think you should get up in the morning and just go, hey, like, I just think that you probably run into some issues there. Maybe you don't. And if you don't, fantastic for you. But if you have trouble going to sleep, if you have trouble with just like racing thoughts and like consistently feeling that like angst or anxiety, and this is something that can help you, it's been proven in a lot of cases to alleviate some of those symptoms, give it a try. And also, I think for something like CBD as it relates or as it stands against something like keto, well, CBD is easy to try and easy to quit, easy to go, I'm not gonna do it anymore, right? Like, I'm like, I don't have to like commit to this for a long time to see if this works well for me. And so for CBD, I buy it for there's not a lot of risk, and you can very quickly go, this works, this doesn't, and cast it aside or envelop it in your life.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. And that's probably not something I was going to mention, but it is extremely valid. So again, like the opportunity cost. So opportunity cost, in addition to like the effect size, And I didn't mention that, but I definitely should have. So I'm glad that you did, because it's incredibly important to mention that too, right? Some of these things have very low opportunity cost. So taking a CBD gummy before going to bed, low opportunity cost. I mean, it's just the amount of money you're going to spend on that bottle of gummies. But if it's something like a ketogenic diet, like it's potentially a huge opportunity cost, because it's you having to shift your diet over to something that you're unfamiliar with. There's a lot of friction there, a lot of inertia. A lot of keto stuff is more expensive as well. And then also you're going to go through a couple of weeks of feeling like pretty shitty. You're going to have like keto brain fog. And then also the idea of, if you want to maintain a keto diet for a long period of time, that's incredibly challenging. Most people are not going to be able to stay on a keto diet for eternity. So it's like, yeah, that there is a large opportunity cost associated with keto. So like I would say in general, CBD, semi undecided on, but I would actually say probably sell. It would go back for me to the effect size, right? I think that there are better things you can do for regulating anxiety than CBD. But again, like the opportunity cost is so low that it's not problematic or harmful if you do try it, especially at a low dose, right? Like you don't want to just blaze yourself up with CBD. But luckily, like CBD doesn't have the same intoxicating effects as like THC does. So that's nice as well. But I'll tentatively sell CBD, at least for the time being. But that leads into, I'll say, something that has a higher effect size for regulating anxiety, which breathwork. So I would buy breathwork for regulating nervous system states and outputs, and including in that as well is anxiety. So previously I would have probably sold pretty hard on breathwork
because of who was selling it.
Yeah, but also just the way that it's being framed, right? Like the way that it's being framed. And this also goes back to, again, like what is the goal of breathwork, right? Is it enlightenment, or is it you to slow your heart rate, control your respiration, be more aware and in tune with what your body's doing, and just like shift you down a level or shift you up a level, right? Because there are sympathetic breathwork techniques versus parasympathetic techniques. Most people know the parasympathetic, like I'm going to calm myself down. I'm going to really like get in tune with myself, get back into my body, take a little breather. But there are things like the Wim Hof breathing method, which is meant to like get you up, get your adrenaline surging, like, flood your body with norepinephrine and all of that. So there are different ways that your body can actually take differing breathwork or differing techniques of breathwork, and then output that and change your nervous system state from parasympathetic to sympathetic or vice versa. And again, I think I would have sold this previously, but I'm definitely coming around to it, especially as I become much more aware of my own default towards very like shallow, very rapid breathing patterns whenever I'm not as in tune with what's going on. And then also kind of that just dump of, I mean, I was going to say like, it's not dopamine, but I mean, just that really like centering feel that you get whenever you do like, 5 minutes of breath work or something, where you're just like very zen, very mellow, like I could go take a nap type of shit. And it's also very hard to do deliberate breath work if you're someone who's never done it, and it feels foreign to almost take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And again, for me, like these things are pretty blatant signs and symptoms that something there is going on whenever you're in more of like an alert fight or flight state versus whenever you're in more of like that parasympathetic rest and digest. So I'm going to buy. I don't think it's like a gigantic effect size, but I think that it is something that people should be much more aware of. And I think that most people should also think about different ways of incorporating deliberate breathwork techniques into their day, because the opportunity cost, again, is so low.
Yeah. I think to your point, I would agree. I would have sold it, but I would have sold it because of how it was being framed.
Okay. Yeah.
Because of, and it's not that I actually disagree that there is no, or I don't believe there's some sort of finding, right? If someone believes like, oh yeah, I saw God, and I'm like, yeah, if you hold your breath long enough, I bet you will. And like, it's, and that's actually why I buy it. Is breath work to me seems very logical. It just seems one of those things that just makes sense. And when you start thinking about the downstream effects, I don't think I've ever heard something that was described as a positive effect of breath work that I was like, really? I was like, that kind of makes sense. Like, I think about it for me, and then, I appreciate you telling me that I was smart earlier. But like for me, I don't always feel smart because I speak so fucking fast and I spin over my words. But what it is, it's people go, are you nervous? Are you anxious? It's like, no, I'm not. I'm trying to get all of my words out in a single breath because I grew up in a house where like if I didn't get out what I needed to say immediately, I didn't get to say it, or your point got muted and it was it, right? So I developed these things of like, I need to get on and off the stage as fast as possible to make sure people hear what I have to say. And I don't ever take the time to go, I can breathe through this. I can breathe through this conversation. I can slow down, enunciate. And that's something I've really been trying to work on because I know with 100% certainty that's where my inability to sometimes fully articulate what I want to say comes across, or how that's what impedes it.
Yeah.
And then also, like you said, I try to do my breath work in the shower, which I love taking the 5 minutes in the shower. It's steamy, it's hot, deep breaths. It helps me. I feel like get more air in, or at least I feel like I'm doing more because you're inhaling the steam and shit. But that Zen feeling that you feel when you step out of the shower and you're like, I'm drying off, and I'm like, I feel good. I feel focused. I don't feel like I'm like you said, in that shallow breath state where I'm like just running through life, trying to get things done, knocking over dominoes as fast as possible. So I definitely buy it. And again, like you said, to my point of CBD, the opportunity cost is so low, nothing bad's going to happen to you. Like you can't hurt yourself. So that being said, well,
so actually to that
extremes, you could push yourself to an extreme. So I guess when I say you can't hurt yourself, no person trying this for the first time is likely going to be able to push themselves to a place where they do some sort of long-lasting damage.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, on that point too, like maybe don't do hyperventilating in like a cold plunge or something, right? Like, don't do that stuff, please. Like holotropic breathing is supposed to induce some type of like DMT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what I was referring to. Like the first time I ever heard about breath work was in that framing.
Yeah. So like the thing is I, from a physiological standpoint, I understand how that could actually happen, right? Like I've never experienced a DMT-like effect, but I've experienced what happens whenever you go through different cycles of hyperventilation and hypoxia, and it definitely affects you. Yeah, I mean, you get very, very clear physiological responses from that. So for me, like that's where I give a lot more credence to the idea that breath work actually can have an impact. Because, for example, if you hold your breath, bad stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, right? Like if you go hypoxic, if you change the ratio of carbon dioxide and oxygen in your bloodstream, things happen. Like
pretty quickly, like pretty rapidly.
Yeah, rapidly. So it's like these things are inarguable. So like from that perspective, it would make very clear sense that there would be other downstream effects from deliberately changing that ratio or finding like more of an equilibrium, right? Or like bringing it back to a center, especially if you start to deviate towards sympathetic dominance, right? Like bringing that a little bit closer back towards, all right, like let's get more oxygen in your blood rather than you just breathing like a fucking maniac all day. All right, so last one, ketogenic diet. And I guess we can broadly buy or sell this one, but I'll probably focus a little bit more on like the brain health side of things. So I don't know if you want to focus more on like the body composition or weight loss side of things.
Yeah, I'll focus there. I'm selling it, but not in a derogatory sense. I'm not saying no one should try this. I'm saying if you come to me and you're like, I want to lose weight. I thought about trying keto. I'm gonna be like, pump your brakes. There are probably several other things that we can try before 180ing your dietary life, right? And I think that's the issue, is people run and have been for our entire lives. We've seen it. Whether it's Advocare or whatever other shake replacement company, people run to things that they see results. Like, oh, this person tried it and like fucking carry down the street and, you know, whatever. Like they like, oh, I want to do this, right? And I will say that if done correctly, you will see results. I just think that so many people run to solutions that they're not willing to navigate the implementation and explantation of. And that's where I start to go, okay, well, hold on. Keto's a lifestyle change. And if you are inherently not doing this forever, then you have to take into consideration what that looks like when you come back. And if we're fat right now because you just don't understand food, restricting our diet doesn't teach you about food. So when you inherently come back to normal life, you'll find yourself here again. So if you were like, hey, I want to do this for a bit because I want to try to catapult some weight loss, and I understand, okay, whatever, they do what you want to do. But if you're coming to me as like an end-all be-all solution to being overweight or being unhappy with your body composition, I'm going to be like, there are 100% better places to start than something as drastic as this.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the weight loss side of things. There are multiple angles you could take from that. So like, I think that the simplification of food choices is a benefit, but I think it's also a negative in that it's like so restrictive, right? So it's like not super sustainable long term, but it's also really easy to be like, okay, this has carbs, this doesn't have carbs, right? Like that makes it a lot simpler. But I agree with you. Most people don't use keto as a diet choice, as something that they're switching to out of like necessity for weight loss. Most of the time it's used or thought of as like a fad diet, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we're pushing back, where it's diets are not meant to be fads, right? So whether it's like Atkins diet, whether it's keto diet, whether it's paleo diet, like if you try to treat a diet as a fad or a Band-Aid that you're using for a short period of time, it's inevitably going to be ineffectual. It's going to fail, right? Yeah, you might have some short-term effects from it, but those are just going to wash out in the end whenever you inevitably retrace that, right? So I would agree with you. And I think that as an intervention for certain populations, whenever it comes to weight loss, it might be helpful, right? If so, again, kind of going back to like what we talked about with Ozempic, you know, certain people have not had success with a lot of different dietary nutritional interventions. And again, keto is so easy, simple that it might be helpful for a lot of people. And it reduces an entire macronutrient group. So that is also the most calorie dense macronutrient group. So you're going to, without fail, reduce your caloric intake going keto. I mean, pretty much without fail, unless you just like slam a fuck ton of carbs, which I hope most people would understand not to do. But whenever it comes to like the brain health side of things, I actually think I might buy. And the one thing I hang my hat on there is just the epilepsy stuff. So it's been very, very, very clearly proven at this point that ketogenic diets are a very potent anti-epileptic intervention for people who have epilepsy related seizures, right? So in that same vein, like anecdotally, I have done keto-esque diets before. Whenever I was, you know, dieting, prepping, very, very low carb for extended periods of time. I wouldn't say that it was like pure keto in the sense that it was like high fat, high protein, or high fat, low protein, and then basically non-existent fat. Non-existent carbs, Jesus Christ. But anyway, the effects were essentially keto-like, right? So anything that you do that will raise your basal ketone level, it's going to have ketogenic-like effects in your body and then also in your brain. But yeah, for a while, you have this fog because whenever you're transitioning into a keto state, It's weird. It's kind of uncomfortable. Your body is in a lot of ways fighting back because it is having to transition the energy that it is running off of. We usually run off of blood glucose. That's our body's normal state. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the preferred state, but it's the normal state, right?
Right.
But if we're transitioning our body to be functioning and using ketones as the gasoline, it does take a bit of upregulation, downregulation of certain enzymes in our body, and it's a slight process. But once you get through that process, if you're able to, you have a sense of like mental clarity that is hard to explain for people that have not been in a keto state. It feels very much like the veil's been lifted and you're like, holy shit, my thoughts have never been this clear before. And it's not really something that you would expect from being, I guess, like in a calorie restriction. I mean, keto doesn't necessarily imply calorie restriction, but a lot of times that's
Side effect.
it comes along with it. But I will say again, anecdotally, like my brain function whenever I was in a ketogenic state was much improved versus whenever I was, running on carbohydrates and blood glucose. So that in itself, I think, has made me switch a little bit more towards like the buy angle whenever it comes to ketogenic diets. But I did take some additional notes here that I thought would be potentially interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like cardiovascular health, there are some pretty interesting thoughts there. If you are getting a lot of your fats from things like, like monounsaturated fats, if you're getting them from quote unquote healthy fats, that might go a long way towards promoting cardiovascular health and, anti-atherosclerotic issues. Hard word to say. But I think you also have to be very careful too. Whenever you switch to a diet that is very high fat, the base assumption is that you're going to have higher triglycerides in your body. So if you're someone who already has issues with your cholesterol or your triglycerides, you might have to think twice about that. But again, it's like these things aren't necessarily as easy to predict as you might expect, because we know that certain fats have beneficial effects on triglyceride levels and cholesterol in the body, and you wouldn't think that just from talking about fats. But yeah, like if we're talking about someone who is pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, obviously removing carbohydrates from the nutrition and from intake is going to be helpful. So that might be another case where it's not the best solution necessarily, or it's not the preferred solution, but it is a solution and it's something that's going to have a high effect size. If you're on the border of being diabetic and you go keto and you remove carbohydrate sources and you remove the stress and strain on your body, on your pancreas and on the body's insulin to have to like take care of all that shit, then yeah, like that's going to be very helpful. And these things obviously are like pretty far reaching, but again, effect size and opportunity cost. So for me, if the symptom is very serious, pre-diabetic, epileptic, then it might be worth the opportunity cost of transitioning into a ketogenic diet. But, if you're someone who's just trying to like lose weight for summer, probably not the Band-Aid that you're looking for.
Yeah. Have you watched Chris Hemsworth's documentary? It's like a 6-part series. So 3 years ago,
a long time ago.
I would suggest watching it. They're actually like, honestly, they're 30, 45-minute episodes. But he, I think 3 or 5 years ago, found out after getting all of his tests run, biomarkers and whatnot, that he has pretty strong biomarkers for early onset dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And he essentially just has been traveled the world to figure out how to have positive effects on his body without drugs, right? So whether it's stress management, the guy pretty much went through breathwork, other stress management techniques, and he does a control, and then he does a final test where essentially he like walks out onto a crane suspended like 200 feet in the air, right? And being able to control his heart rate, which is actually, it's pretty fucking cool, right? He does it with hot cold therapy, and just like, because he's fucking rich, he can like see both anecdotal and actual like physical data points, tangible data points. But he does fasting for one, and he actually visits a tribe, I believe, in Africa. And this is a tribe away from civilization, and they have to be able to operate on ketones essentially when hunting, because they've gone days without eating and they need to provide for the tribe. But then he sits with this guy, he sits with Atia, and he pretty much just talks all about like fasting and ketosis and the positive effects it has on the body. And so after seeing that, I did a first 24-hour, then a 48-hour, then a 72-hour fast. And once you get past, for me, hour like 36,
Yep.
I'm like, I could never eat again. I'm like, obviously I know I will need to eat again, but my mind it's shifted on what is the goal for today. Is the goal work? Is it this? Is it that? And then ironically enough, I also feel like my senses are heightened, or at least more sensitive, whether it's smell, touch, like I'm just more acutely aware of things, but not in a anxious of what was that way, but just in like, I'm just noticing everything because I'm not thinking about food. And if I take my experience there and I go, well, if this is even being enacted to some degree for people who are trying to bring on this diet, and you talk about the possible downstream effects of, hey, like if you have, markers for Alzheimer's, this could be something that you want to consider, right? Epilepsy and other, just brain conditions, disorders. If this is something that they can enact and see positive benefits for, I would 100%, I could buy that. I'm like, yeah, for sure. I think that the framing is always important. You talk about brain health. I'm like, no, I know for sure when I'm entering that ketone energy source, that more ketosis state, ketoic, can you say that? State, I feel better. That, like you said, that veil, that fog has been lifted and I feel much better. So I could definitely buy it. I was actually looking at an article for this and I wanted to scroll past it, and they talk a lot about Alzheimer's. And just, again, it's not data so significant. Like, you can't compare it to Ozempic data. One, the data is not that vast. Also, I think it's a lot harder to track someone's like brain degradation in a large group size, because then you have to try to equalize, well, what type of Alzheimer's, how severe, so on and so forth. But if you're telling me that the data is not insignificant, and like you said, the opportunity cost is low, and you can implement this, and I think very early see at least some acute positive responses, whether it's just clarity and whatnot, then it's like, give it a go. Give it a go, as long as you're educated. And again, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. Like you said, if you're just trying to drop a couple pounds before the sun comes out, probably a better solution for you out there.
One last note that I think we should probably just make before we wrap this up is that a ketogenic diet is also different than fasting.
It is, yes. I was just speaking about my personal experience with ketosis in general, and then also like thinking about ketones and just as a specific, and then going, okay, cool, if I can extrapolate any of my experience into any of their experience, because I've never ever had, I would never say my carbs ever been low enough to say that I was even probably brushing up against a keto diet. I think that for the most part, fasting and the experience I have in that very extreme and small space with just ketones and ketosis in general, and thinking about that and trying to extrapolate the best I can, understanding they are different.
Yeah. So, did you take ketones whenever you did that? Like, did you take exogenous ketones?
No, I was actually going to ask you buy or sell on those. But because we have them in the fridge and they're fucking gross. And I did not take them long enough to even.
I've never tried them. I've honestly never tried them. But I have read a lot about people taking exogenous ketones as a way to get themselves into ketosis faster, especially if they are doing some kind of like fast. Because if you do a fast, you probably won't get into ketosis, even if you're not eating anything, just because your body has such high stores of glycogen, and your liver has a really high store of glycogen as well. Your blood glucose that's already circulating. So like in most cases, you're probably not going to actually get into full ketosis. But fasting itself has other benefits, especially whenever it comes to like cognitive clarity, that I do think are really important. But no, I was just curious because I've never taken exogenous ketones, but it's also probably not something I really want to do because they do taste like shit.
For my knowledge, before we get ready to bounce, because to my understanding, and this is just going off of like reading and watching things with Atia and other people who are experts in the space, typically they said, hey, day three-ish is when you start to see ketones in your system rise to a level considerable enough to consider like you are in a more keto state than obviously you are in your normal rest state. And so that is why I spoke about it that way, but I could also be incorrect.
I also forget off the top of my head how long it would be for like a fasted ketosis. Because that would depend on a lot of things. Like I know, like if I were to fast, I would probably sip on like essential amino acids, which would itself slow down the rate of getting into ketosis. So like there are a lot of different ways that I think you would be able to measure that. But no, I was just speaking in general because I wasn't sure if you had actually taken ketones supplementally to get into ketosis faster.
I will take the ones we have left in the fridge and I'll report back. Thank you guys for tuning in. We actually have a couple more. I have a couple more that I'm going to ask Bryce next time we do this because this was kind of fun. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know if you have any personal experiences. We'd love to hear those as well. And we will see you next time.